I have a Trump-hating judge with a Trump-hating wife and family whose daughter worked for Kamala Harris and now receives money from the Biden-Harris campaign, and a lot of it.
It has begun. The demonizing of not only the DA, Alvin Bragg, but now the judge and the judge's spouse and the judge's kids. We are like a couple of hours from him being arraigned, and he's already launching his war against them. A war, by the way, that he has been warned not to engage in. Like earlier that day when Juan Marchand, the judge, said, warned the president not to make comments that, quote, jeopardize the safety or well-being of any individual, specifically saying, please refrain from making comments or engaging in conduct that has the potential to incite violence, create civil unrest, or jeopardize the safety or well-being of any individuals. Perhaps the judge should have been more specific and said, like my wife and my daughter, you insane person, because there is only one reason that you would be focusing on them. They're not going to be deciding this thing. They have nothing to do with it. He wants them to be hounded. He is using mobster tactics to put pressure on the judge to let him go. And the reason that this is consequential, why I think this is one of the things we need to focus on coming out of the arraignment, is not just that it's terrible, that we should never have a politician doing that, but that it's also consequential. Legal experts say that he is likely to, based on prior experience, be ordered not to speak about his case, have a gag order, and breaking such an order could potentially land him in contempt of court, which means jail time. Specifically in New York, it means up to a year in prison if he receives a gag order and he violates it, which he wants to. He could be locked up as a result of that. And perhaps trying to get ahead of the ability of them to lock him up, he apparently has switched on the whole defund the police thing. He started off his morning on Truth Social bleating, Republicans in Congress should defund the DOJ and the FBI until they come to their senses. Wouldn't exactly help in this case because I hate to be the person who has to like educate Trump, but they're not the ones that are gonna get you on the hush money payments, dude. It's Southern District of New York. It's like the judges are. Anyway, the threats are out there. We've even got more threats, but Jared, what do you think?
Well, I'd love that you point out with his truth, because people like these smart folks who know the system, just on this small point here, they know that doesn't make any sense. They'll talk about how he typed in all caps and talk about the DOJ and the Justice Department. We got to defund the police, which is funny because you know how the Republicans are all about, whoever wants to defund the police are evil. So he's already on that line. But then again, how it just doesn't match up. People got to point this out. The things that he says that don't make sense based off of how things work, because that's what gets people on these rabid attacks and going after Alvin Bragg. Going after Joe Biden, saying that somehow he set up George Soros to pay him to then pay Alvin Bragg to do this. Like they don't connect, just like they did with Merrick Garland. These things just don't connect. So just to point out the stupidity of how they've gone about the demonization, it'll show you that they really are just grasping for anything that they can to rile people up to then get angry, which leads to them, of course, this whole thing with the judge himself. He knows his audience is easily riled up, easily prone to violence, which again is why they were concerned about potential protests before he even went in for that arraignment, or even the indictment announcement that was supposed to happen the Tuesday before the last Tuesday because Trump announced it. All that stuff, he knows his people are violent. So if you say things like, oh, look, they're coming for me, enemy, coming for me, they want to target me, come and get me. All those things sound very much like, oh, they're breaking into the house. It's time to start defending ourselves, because we know that's the excuse they give every time they want to start aggressively going after folks with their guns. So yeah, but other folks have said he's just trying to get him to recuse himself and get off the case. If he thinks so, maybe that's his primary reason, but the secondary one is always the violence.
Yep, and by the way, if you got that and they put in a new judge, they would do the same thing. Like it doesn't matter. Like I know if you're a conservative watching this, you cannot accept that. He's just going to make up something. There's always going to be something that makes it. It doesn't matter. They choose in some of these cases. The people who've investigated him have been lifelong Republicans. That is never enough. That never matters at all from Trump's point of view. He finds a way to make that the bad thing. So anyway, like we'll see. The threats so far from Trump haven't been as bad about the judge as some of the prior threats towards Alvin Bragg were. So maybe his lawyers are still having some sort of effect. but we're very early on in this process. It's like December when the next court date comes, and the actual trial is supposed to start, I think, in January. That is, I think, when this thing might really heat up. But anyway, it isn't also along the way just him. Don Jr. decided to follow in his father's disgusting footsteps by also trying to generate some hatred and fear of the judge investigating his father and the hush money payments. Putting out this post, he retweeted an article from Breitbart that focuses on the daughter of the judge that's on the case. In specific, not only putting her name, but putting her picture. And you need to do that because trying to come up with a cover story, I guess just because you want someone to hunt her down. I guess that's really the only explanation for why you would do that. Why Breitbart, a news outlet, would do an article about that. What does she have to do with anything? Like, no, seriously, that's a serious question. Any conservatives in the chat, what does she have to do with anything? She has nothing to do with anything. Again, this is just Donald Trump Jr. now reassuring his father that, if there is a gag order, well, maybe it's not Trump that does the generating of the fear and the hostility, JR.
Yeah,
well,
of course, that's the next step. That's the mob mentality and the tactics and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, I was trying to look into the validity of how much his daughter and he said wife and whoever else in the associations that they say they all have, but then how that then does connect to this and also this particular judge. Because I remember there was this guy who was in office. I think his name was Trump, and his entire family was connected to folks that had all kinds of conflicts of interest, business-wise, internationally, the way that they profited off of their positions, the way that they helped other friends and family members also profit off of their positions. All, I was gonna say under the cover of darkness, but all in broad daylight. And as people brought it up, what they said was, literally, there was absolutely no explanation behind it. It was just, what are you talking about? This is the Trumps. What they do is right, just because we're supposed to believe them. So we're supposed to now listen to folks who say there's some kind of conflict because the judge's daughter had some kind of other positions that they disagree with, maybe along partisan lines that they actually don't like. So because of that, then he'll be influenced. Sure, people can want to believe that. So I guess in all aspects, you have to try and play it down the same role or list down those same rules no matter what, but they don't do that. There's reasons why they don't do that because as we've already heard, this two-tier justice system that they're so mad about, they're upset about it because it's become a little more even here in this case. And the two-tier that they want is for them to be immune from any crimes and any kinds of speculation for their conflicts of interest.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.